Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next episode where we introduce, not reintroduce, another one of our ambassadors. Today, I'm being joined by Dhaval Panchal, who is joining me, I think, from Houston, if I'm not mistaken, Dhaval.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us, Dhaval. Very, very thankful to have you as part of the ambassador community, and especially for you making time today to share a bit more about yourself with us.
Yes, hi. I'm Dhaval Panchal. I've been an Agile practitioner since early 2003, and I started my company, Evolve Agility, almost 8 years ago. There were a lot of things that I felt could be done differently in terms of Agile transformation, and I felt like taking the risk of starting my own company and standing behind my own approach and ideas of how we help companies transform in a safe manner. I don't mean scaled agile. I mean,
Don't ask.
but in a manner, that works out. I would describe it in one word: value of fairness. When we go through agile transformations, there is a lot of asymmetry, and I think with Evolve Agility, we strike the right balance and also help organizations to secure a spot where they are much better than they were before. Because what we don't want is companies to slide back. So that's our aim. We do training, we do coaching, we do consulting. We can scale up and down based on your needs. So a lot of variety there in what we do.
Yeah, so we'll get to what you're doing today, but I actually want to start, Dhaval, this conversation with, you mentioned 2003.
Yes.
That's when your Agile journey started. Walk me through what was back then your context? What kind of pains or problems was the organization that you were part of or the team that you were part of facing? How did this whole Agile journey start for you?
So, Sohrab, I'm a mechanical engineer. Yeah. A mechanical engineer who took to programming, C++ programming. I got the book. There was a course in college, and I couldn't help myself. I was in front of the computer programming in C++. I took a whole structural engineering textbook and made a program to solve the textbook. So in some respects, I was doing test-driven development, test-first development, not test-driven development, because the textbook had answers. The reason I say that is in where I grew up in India, once you are locked into a degree, you're locked into a degree. So what I did after I came out of my mechanical engineering is join a company, one of the biggest IT companies in India. And after 3 years, I was ready to call it quits. I did not want to do anything with software anymore. We had worked on projects where I practically moved my duffel bag into the office center, and we worked. In IT, you would call it a death march, where you're basically working from Monday to Saturday, and then Sunday you go back and you come back and you deliver the project. And after we did this huge waterfall style project, I was like, this is not for me. I'd rather go and build roads because after 3 years, that project didn't even go into production. So if I build a road, people will actually use it. There will be a sense of satisfaction. So while I was here in Seattle, I interviewed at other places. Actually, one of my friends said, IT industry is different now, and maybe you should try out. So I walk into this company and I'm talking to Brent, and Brent shows me a big Gantt chart and he says, can you analyze this project plan? And without a blink of an eye, I said, nothing's going to work out according to the plan. So my question is, how are we looking at mitigating risks? And that's when we started to talk about Scrum. We talked about XP. I got invited into the Extreme Programming team early in 2003, where we built some amazing applications. I mean, if you recall, this is post.com bust. There are still many startups who are doing well, but they have to execute now. You can't just sell a story and let the story do your bidding in the marketplace. You actually had to build stuff, and Scrum and XP was the way to go. I mean, that's how we built some of the most difficult and complicated applications since 2003 until I moved into more formally training transformation work in 2012, 2011 timeframe.
Okay, so for about 10 years, you did the actual building. Now, I want to quickly go back to that interview that you had.
Yes.
Did Brent want to test you?
Yeah. No, that was it. That was the
Oh,
thing.
quick question.
That was a trick question because he said this is the first most interviews with him lasted for 10 minutes. My interview lasted an hour and a half. And he didn't reveal it at the time, but he did reveal after I was through the whole, joining the company process.
Okay. So they had probably gone through very similar experiences as you had described with your previous job.
Yes, yeah, they had a very well-staffed XP team, and yeah, they had already felt. Part of the context at that time is, if you notice, a lot of outsourcing was happening in late 1990s, right? So this is a US-based company trying to be competitive within the US market, and they had to do something different. And Scrum XP was their way because they could build fairly quickly in the same time frame that some other company would be spending to collect requirements. Like, we would have products out before the documents were complete in other similar projects, in
So
comparison.
before the others could leverage the lower cost of outsourcing, you had already built something
Yeah, and the customer was using it.
and the customer was using it. Exactly. So you had delivered value where the others, yeah, I mean, this is so similar to many of the companies that we've seen over the past 20, 25 years, right?
Yeah,
So your story is in that sense a very natural one in that particular
right,
context. Now walk me through what triggered your move towards more training and coaching, because you're also coming from the engineering side, right?
right.
You
Yeah,
mentioned earlier, instead of like building stuff that nobody's uses, you'd rather build a road because you know that people would use it. So
yes,
I assume there is like this engineer within you that really likes to build stuff that people play around with. Now moving into training and coaching, you're also removing yourself to some extent from the builder themselves.
right.
What was that move like?
Well, Saurabh, I'd never actually removed myself from being a builder. But the reason I say that, this is a conscious choice for me since early on, is I would spend 50% of my time doing training. So my public trainings would be maybe two per month, and that has been a consistent pattern ever since I've started. Maybe one private training a month, and the rest of the time I'm spending on the ground with the teams, doing what needs to get done. It's very hard to box it into just coaching because the term coaching itself has taken a very specialized meaning. My main pursuit is to be on the ground with the people to lead transformations. Now, over the years, my engagement has evolved, right? Earlier, I had to help people to see what Scrum is. I would be talking to stakeholders, getting buy-in. We'd get some space in a basement somewhere so we can prove Scrum to be true. To then, in early 2011, 2012, it was the norm and everyone wanted to do it. So now I'm getting into boardrooms and I'm getting into outside the basement trying to explain and teach people on Scrum and Agile. So I've always been on the ground in some capacity, building either an organization or a product, as opposed to only training. I'll also say one more thing. Like, I'm not a trainer. I did not get professional training. I
Same with me.
Right. As I was developing my own competency to become a trainer, I would view this skill development of being an effective communicator and a trainer itself was building something. I've experimented with so many different ways of teaching a module. I mean, it will take 2 hours for us to go through, and you'll probably see a lot of different techniques that are now common. Like, we all share and we grow together. I mean, that's been part of the strength of the agile community in many ways.
Yeah. No, it reminds me a lot of the conscious choices that I also made. I never wanted to remove myself from building stuff,
Yep.
and I come more from the product angle, less from the engineering angle.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then also once you move from, as you mentioned, from the basement to the boardroom,
Right.
I was always like, when I taught leadership, I wanted to make sure that I have those leadership experiences myself,
Yes.
right? So like having your own team, dealing with all the difficult things that every team goes through, even like having to fire people, right? All of those things happen, and you can read about things, but as Henrik Nieberg at one point told me, he said, in theory, the gap between practice and theory is very small. In practice, it's not. So, and that has been true. And And therefore, this is also why I'm so passionate about having people like you as our ambassadors, because I know that in addition to a lot of theoretical knowledge, there's like a lot of practical knowledge, especially in many different industries and different companies, and that really allows us, I think, to help clients in a completely different way, especially if we want to also differentiate from the larger consultancies where the people do not spend 50%. I mean, they don't even spend 10% of their time
Right.
building themselves. It's only in the consulting space. So I really admire that. Now, Devil, fast forward.
Hmm.
So 2003, you start. Around 2011, 12, 13, you move more into the role of a trainer slash coach, and and you continue to stay as a builder, right? Working now mostly with clients. Now, 2025, where is your focus? Where is your passion? What makes Dawal unique compared to a lot of the other people that are out there?
Well, there are I always feel like I try to express myself through my blog articles, and I feel like my articles are at least 7 years behind. so so when I work with organizations, like you said, there is this difference between theory and practice. And in practice, you have to make localized adjustments that uh, make it a fair transformation for everyone. So what that means is, even though the organization may have asked you to provide some training, if that is not the appropriate medium for the org to transform, for the team to change, then you need to have the ability to have that conversation with the sponsor and the participants to say, let's take a different tact. And what that different tact looks like is very unique to every single situation. So one of the things that I feel have come out over the last 3 4 years, which I haven't written about because there's always priorities, is how we have used personal Kanban as a way to short circuit the learning process. In other words, rather than teaching individuals about WIP, rather than teaching individuals about backlog and prioritization, we work to improve individual performance where the organization cannot provide a fully cross-functional team. And there are a variety of reasons why in practice there is a there's a reason why they can't give us a whole team, yet they want them to do Scrum. And that's a dilemma now because they think they can do Scrum without a cross-functional team. And we know like it's going to be very challenging. So how do we find the happy medium? So we start with individuals given the time that they have to apply personal Kanban to their own work. Within 2 or 3 weeks, it is now obvious to them why I should prioritize, why I should manage my own energy, why I should have a WIP limit. More importantly, they have now learned about the nature of their own working style. And especially now when you're remote, everybody has developed a different working style, you know. Uh, so we want individuals to be self-aware first. And when they are self-aware, now when they join a team and we create a team, they can actually have a meaningful conversation about what working agreements will work for them. And we are not fighting whether we should prioritize or we should have minimum tasks in progress because they have personally experienced that. So that's one of the adjustments. And so that's what is exciting to me is being able to map theory into practice and make modifications, or I would say improvisations that are very situational. Because I feel strongly that as at 2025, we have to bring back the oldest professional code, which is do no harm. And you're a doctor, so you probably took that oath, right? Uh, do no harm first. Like that should be the minimum barrier. If whatever you do creates a harm into the organization, into the people, basically, if it's an unfair bargain, then you have to hold yourself accountable as a professional, which unfortunately I feel uh, sometimes is not happening. I mean, it's just a function of getting too popular, you know. You would
Yeah,
never find fakes for products that don't succeed. So I think it's a testament to the success of Agile that we have so many fakes, and now the fake is flaking. So I'm hopeful. 26 would be a different year.
yeah. Now you mentioned do not harm, and I mean, I love these medical analogies.
Yes.
There's there's another thing in the world of medicine that I always bring with me is the dosage, or the dose makes the poison, right?
Yes.
So when we think about the practices that we introduce into organizations,
Hmm.
And for every patient, it's different. So for every
Yes.
organization, it's different, right?
Yes.
What might not cause any harm for patient X or for organization X might actually cause harm for organization Y. Now, we don't know that up front. There's
Yes.
a lot of things that we don't know. And even more important is then the empirical approach, where we inspect and adapt. So when you think about transformation, and having listened to you now for the past around 20 minutes, I can see that you're really passionate about the transformation itself. I would first love to understand, what does transformation mean for you? So why do you think should organizations transform, and where do they transform to? And then how do you bring that do not harm philosophy
Hmm.
combined with empiricism into your approach?
So thank you for bringing those response, because that is one of my other key points, and I'll try to weave it into it. Uh, First, transformation ultimately is about moving from playing to sustain to playing to win. Now, when you are playing for sustainment, you think everything is correct. The market's going to be stable. Whatever we build, whatever we do, however we do it, is going to be the norm because we have been successful. So that will be playing to sustain. But unfortunately, in playing to sustain, you accumulate a lot of hidden risk that you don't see until the market situation changes. And then all of those risks, they come back. So first and foremost is, how do we become an organization that is playing to win, which is another way asking for continuous improvement. Not to imply that improvement happens every 5 seconds or every one day, which is the common misunderstanding around continuous improvement. It does not mean that you're always getting better at every day. What it means is that your attitude is about getting better. But in reality, when you start working with organizations, you have to accept that it is a very complex system. So I tend to use the three-step approach, roughly speaking, and I've had to explain this to my clients before we engage. So thank you for allowing me to make a pitch. The first one is engage. What engagement to me means is, as an observer, as a third party, someone entering a organizational system, I have to be mindful about the fact that my presence itself is going to change how the system behaves. So, which means I have to minimize myself, which means I don't project too much, and that's just, it suits me. So go observe how things are going. Talk to the senior executives. What are your OKRs? What are some guardrails or measures that you use to find out whether you are doing well or not? Like, so I want to know first, no matter what change we make, what are some things that we should not cause harm with? And this could be people, it could be relationships, it could be business outcomes, it could be some measures or metrics. So that's engage. We learn about our customers. After we've engaged, after we've observed, then we get into a stage where we have to co-design a set of experiments. So we'll have a conversation. That the techniques are like more than I can rattle off. But the bottom line is to agree on some trails, like a hiking trail or a trial. Um, and once we have agreed on those trails or trials, we set up some indicators, like what measures will have an impact on this and which measures you will not see any impact. Just because we did this, it doesn't mean you're going to win the best product award. It will mean this thing will go down. So have clarity on it. Now we run the experiment. So people involved in that ecosystem are part of that experiment. They know why we are doing it. They know what we are going to guard against and which measures need to improve. Maybe a month or two. After that, and this is the most important point, is you have to let the system stabilize. In other words, if you now say, okay, we made this great improvement in 2 months, now let's go change even more things, that may work for the team locally, but everybody else around that experiment has not yet changed. I mean, they have to modify their own interfaces, build comfort with it to allow for this change to settle in. So that's what we mean by alignment is, after we've engaged, we've run some experiments. Now let's align with the rest of the organization. Maybe they get informed or educated about it and they'll say, we want something similar, or at minimum, they will not, take it, or tear it apart. I don't mean intentionally. It's just anything that is unfamiliar in an enterprise, it gets attacked by antibodies.
Exactly. That's also the analogy that I use, right? The, the antibodies will come for you. So you basically need to create a new kind of equilibrium, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of organizations, forget about that. And again, you can take a lot of analogies from medical space. If someone, for example, tries to lose weight, if they don't stabilize, they will go back to whatever weight they had before, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the same in many other areas. So finding that new equilibrium, which means being aware of the context and making sure that the context also adapts to what we have adapted to, right?
Yes. Yes.
That then creates that new equilibrium, which then can become the foundation for the next wave of improvement. So it's not about settling, it's not about stopping, it's just making sure that we are now stabilizing before we continue the journey. Ah, I love that. So it's basically engaging, experimenting, and then the third E could be creating that equilibrium there.
Right. Yeah. Equilibrium, alignment. See you understand that concept. So I really, yeah. It's not just slowing down. It's about securing and stabilizing your footing before you take the next one. Yeah.
And I think, Dawal, now looking at the work that I do with clients, I could assume, I believe that the first two would probably be like very intuitive also for clients that would say, yeah, 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 makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
For the third one, I assume, and please share with me your experience,
Mm-hmm.
it could be that they might not have the patience for it. Is that assumption correct? Have you observed something similar to that?
Patience is partly my responsibility to help them kind of see a
Exactly. So this is then where you would have to make sure that you help them get that level of patience because they're always in that rush, right? They
right.
always feel this urgency, which is good on one hand, but going back to the dose makes the poison.
Yeah.
Sometimes being impatient could also be then that poison.
Right, right, and this is where like the equilibrium becomes important, no? Because oftentimes you see that asymmetry when there is someone who is like, we need to change everything now, versus others like we can barely hold on. So how do I now bring both perspectives in and help them to kind of find the pace that works for them? That's part of my responsibility as a guide or a transformation, change agent. So yeah, it's kind of hard to say like here is the 5-step plan because it is very, very, it's very subjective. It's on context, you know. I guess for folks, we've had some of our case studies on online. One of the case studies that I think I'd like to call out is the one we had with a Fortune 100 wholesaler. I mean, we replaced about 12 big name, big four consulting so-called change agents with just two of us. And yeah, I mean, you don't need an army of people if you have the right two or three people, you know, and that's the core message that I hope like folks can glean. There is effective change possible. It does not involve an army. You can get the right experts or ambassadors, and that would be the trick. I mean, that would be the way to go about it.
Yeah. No, that's also how I always feel because I think there's an army of people in the organization already.
Yes.
And those are people that deeply understand their organization in many aspects. They
Yes.
have incredible talent, incredible experience. They do want to make the change. And most of those people, what I've also observed is when an army of coaches or consultants come in, even the people that want to change resist that change
Yes.
because they feel that why are we not leading this? And if, on the contrary, an organization is smart enough to bring in one or two people that can be real guides or not even guides, like sparring partners for the transformation that can sometimes do the work that the internals cannot do, right? Because there are limitations to being internal,
Yes.
but also then limit themselves to that and consider themselves as part of that internal group that is driving the change together. I think that can go way further than what we traditionally see how organizations approach change. So I fully agree with you on that one.
Yeah. That's again an example of playing to sustain mindset, Saurabh, right? They're looking at the existing employees and saying, you all keep the lights running. And you'll hear these kind of conversations where we can't send our team to training because who will do the work or all of that. So they'll keep the employees locked into playing to sustain, and then they will hire external people to install something new, whatever that installation process looks like, and that alienates the organization. It's a lot of a lot of change introduced, which does not stick because the organization as a system will reject it. It's not
Absolutely.
going to accept it because they haven't owned it. They're just renting it. So
And the DNA is not compatible.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's the wrong blood. It's the wrong blood type.
yes, yes. There's a lot of factors have not been checked for.
Yeah. Dhaval, I could go on with this conversation, but
Same
we
here.
do have a time box. And now we're at the end of that time box. I think it's super interesting to see where your journey started 22 years ago,
Yes.
your XP journey. And as you mentioned earlier, there must be something special about the work that we do that there's so much fake about it out there.
Yeah.
And I like that perspective a lot. That gives me hope. Also with regards to what we're building now. Again, very grateful to have you being part of that journey. You and I share a lot of memories from various conferences we attended together and late night conversations we had. So very much looking forward to our ongoing conversations and having you as part of our ambassador network. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.